Hey everyone. So hopefully you can hear me okay. We're going to have Robert Michael come on and discuss some important topics that everyone needs to know. Not everyone. And no one needs to know anything, really. We're all in various levels of consciousness here. And, you know, we can let social media use us and suck up our energy, or we can utilize it to get good knowledge out. So that's what we're going to try to do today. And this will be my first time talking with Robert. And I've already watched all of his YouTube videos. I recommend everyone check him out. He's on REM Private Management. And everyone, if you are not on the Telegram chat, get on there. Truth is the golden rule. And the organized tribe, if you want to make comments and add content. So let's see here. Hopefully Robert will be joining here soon. And we can discuss law and really get into it. Can everyone let me know if they can hear me okay? There you are. Okay. Okay, so Robert, there you go. No, there we go, view request, okay. Okay, loud and clear, perfect, thank you, President Soup. Okay, so Robert, there you are.
All right, hey man, what's happening?
Not much, just want to glean some knowledge today, you know? And
good.
Yeah, so when it comes to my name, you can call me Dave, I guess, you know, whatever, you know.
Okay, that works, Dave. Just call me Rob.
Okay.
You can shorten to Robert Michael, make it a little easier.
Right. Now, is Michael your middle name, correct?
Michael is my last name because that's the last name I was given.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah.
But in the modern world, in the sleeping world, yes, it would be my middle name.
Right. Right. We always go with our given name. And,
Always.
And yeah, we never want to list all three in a row, because that is a bonded surety to a bankrupt franchise in a bankrupt system, as I understand it, right?
Well, that's one thing, but it's also, you know, bonding yourself to Satan. I mean, it's a dead entity. It's actually a trust. I mean, if you want to get down to it, it's a trust, and the Vatican holds the heirship to that trust. And you know, they don't want us to have anything to do with it, although we're supposed to be the beneficial interest holders of that trust. So yeah, we don't want to bind ourselves to that name ever.
Yeah.
Never.
What I did was I did a assumed name certificate with the Minnesota Secretary of State, and I've heard you mention that's one thing you can do. And basically, it was just separating myself, the man. You saw how I write my name, my last name, comma, middle, hyphen, first, middle, and just separating and showing that I am the name holder for that entity. And so I'm not that, right? And that was my thinking when I did that. What is your thoughts on the assumed name certificate?
Right. Well, again, it's just another tool to separate yourself. But to me, it's all about what you're answering, who you're answering to, right? Because if you look on anything that you're sent and it's a name other than you, then you shouldn't be answering to it in any way other than, I'm not quite sure who you're looking for.
Right.
Please identify the person. That's not my name, right? So yeah, I mean, an assumed name certificate is one way people do it. You know, there's a lot of different ways. But the key is always, I mean, you have to live it. You have to live it. So even if you just start doing business that way, right, and not agreeing to that name, you're still protecting yourself. But you got to know how to keep that up. You got to know how to keep going.
So it's one layer of separation. And I've watched all your YouTube videos, and when it comes to putting the public on notice, it seems like that's a big part of the process, is letting all these agencies know that, you know, that everything is contracts and notices, right? And so you have a power of attorney form that you got the clerk recorder to accept. Is that right? Because I can't get the clerk recorder to accept any of my documents. We only do property records.
Yeah. Well, if you look on their list of documents that they record, they should have the power of attorney there. That should
Okay.
be one. And that's why I use a power of attorney. Number one is to use it as a vehicle to attach other documents to it, to create my public record. So that's one of the reasons I use power of attorney, but also I want to show that, I do have power of attorney over this organization if I choose to operate it in a way. Well, I only operate it as general executor. I don't operate it in any other way, because you can't operate it as a beneficiary. You're not a beneficiary of the trust. You're a general executor over the estate, which houses the trust, which has the trust in it, right? Because the estate is the sum of all property. So if that trust is, and you're not dead, the guy is dead that the trust belongs to. So you have to, operate it like a general executor would, and say, well, I'm standing in the shoes of the dead guy right now, but I don't have any liability to it because it's not mine. I'm just administrating it. So the power of attorney sets me up for that. That's one of the documents I use. But really, what I do is I just create a public record, like you were just saying. I'll take that, and then I'll take my declaration of status, which is really huge, and I'll attach it to it, and I'll record it in the county. I don't think it's necessary, so to speak. There's a million ways to skin this cat, but that's just one of the things that I do. Even if you had a declaration of status that you didn't record, it's still powerful. I mean, your declaration of your divine status is the most powerful thing you can have, because these beings, these organizations, they're all dead. They're all fiction. It's the Book of the Dead. Right. You're familiar with the Book of the Dead? I mean, that's really what's going on here.
Right. Yeah. And so I have an affidavit of status that I bring everywhere. I got it notarized, and I tried to get it recorded at the clerk recorder to put everyone on notice. But what I did get done was I had my assumed name certificate filed in the county paper, or put in the the local paper here, and that I'm the executor, and I have this really good language I got from a really cool Facebook group. So I have put the public on notice that I am the name holder for that entity. I'm not that entity. So that's one thing that's good, right? I mean, it's not the clerk report, but it's one layer of putting notice.
Yeah, that's public notice, which is called constructive notice, know. So now when you go to notice someone and you give them that record, now they have actual notice. So yeah, absolutely.
That's one thing. Yeah, so this whole thing, we started off talking about basically correcting your status, and you started talking about the estate. And I think people are really starting to understand what's happening with the birth certificate, but there's more to it. When you talk about estate, what are you referring to exactly? It can help people wrap their heads around, the trust that's created, and what is an estate? What is our estate? What estate do we want to be the executor for? Yeah.
So the real estate is the real man and all the property that the real man could ever have. Any property, because it's all in the fake man, which is the straw man, or whatever these terms people want to use. There's a lot of focus on the birth certificate, but it's not really. The birth certificate is just a certificate certifying that an action took place, or that something took place, or that there's a document that is a matrix document. So that's all the certificate is. I mean, I shouldn't say it's all it is. It's a lot of things. But the real key is the estate and the trust. And the trust is Social Security, because some countries, they don't have birth certificates like we do. They have them in the church, and that's it, like Portugal. Okay. And in Portugal, you're not going to step up and say, well, this was recorded and you guys are using securities and all, and they're not having it. But they do have an insurance account, right? That's really what is the lifeblood that's being sucked out of this, is that Social Security account. They all have them. So that's a trust. Now the estate is the sum of all the property of that entity, right? Or any entity, or any man or woman. So that entity has an estate, the trust estate, and everything that attaches that Social Security number is the estate of that organization. Every piece of property. I mean, right? We can't do anything without it, right? With Social Security, birthday, name, address, like they want all that, because they're time. That's all. Everything is property. Everything. Rights are property. Court cases are property. Tickets are property. Everything is property, right?
Right.
So you just got to figure out, well, whose property is it, and what rights do I have in that property? that's why I always tell people, it's not just about your status as a living man or a free man or whatever you want to call it, as opposed to this organization or debtor. It's also about the property and the obligations. That's the three departments of civil law, right? Property, status, obligation. So you want to cover those at 3 areas in everything that you're doing constantly, right?
Right.
And define who you are in those 3 as related to those 3 areas. Because every single law, all the thousands of laws out there, all boil down to those 3 concepts.
Civil law. Those are the basis of civil law.
Yeah, of civil law, right? Then you have common law, equity,
Right.
and all kinds of other law. But this is a civil law system, at least in this country. In other countries, they say it's common law / civil law. But in 1948, they merged equity and common law into one form of action in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which is the model for all the states, and that's civil law.
Right.
So, criminal law is different, although there's a lot of civil law going on to criminal law too. But again, that goes further down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So the estate is all of it.
The estate is all of it, all the property. Okay.
All the property. So if you read the legal definition of estate, it's probably like 20 paragraphs long. They give you this huge long paragraph. But if you boil it down, it really just means the sum of all property.
Okay. Got it. Right. Because people need to realize that legal is very different than lawful. And legal is literally the undoing of God's laws. Right?
It's contract.
Yeah.
Right. So essentially what you're saying is God's law is natural. We don't have to write up a contract if we just follow the basic tenets, right? Jesus said there's 2: love God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, and treat your neighbor the way you want to be treated as yourself. So if you're following those, and then you got to form all these contracts, yes, that's legal. So as soon as you form a contract, now you have legal stuff going on. So right. It is the undoing of God's law.
I was listening to a video by David Straight. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was talking about in Genesis how we were given dominion, right? And dominion over the land, the air, and the water. And so when you look at what's above the water, it's the land, and what's above the land is the air. And so the supreme law really is the trust law of the air, because you have the law of the waters, commerce, admiralty, maritime, contract, and then you have the law of the land, which is common law and equity, and then you have trust law. And what I've been learning from you is that trust law is really so crucial to understand the components of it. And so that was one thing I wanted to talk about with you was trust law and the public trust. The way I understand it is that we are supposed to be the beneficiaries, the men and women of the public trust. I could be wrong on that, but it's been switched around. So we are the trustees and the public servants are now the beneficiaries.
Yeah, well, the offices, right? The organizations are the beneficiaries. And it's pretty much like that. I mean, there's a public trust and you're supposed to be, but the public trust is Social Security for the most part, right? That's the individual trust. The public trust is the Constitution and the bankruptcy that it's under, right? Because the Constitution is nothing more than a bankruptcy charter. It's a bankruptcy trust. So if you understand bankruptcy, you can understand how a lot of this is working, right? Because the entire country's been bankrupt since its inception. It's never been out of bankruptcy. It's always owed its debt to someone else. It never had any of its own money. Even when it did have gold and silver, those debts were still owed. Right. And that's what I was saying the other day. Like if you take every 70 years as bankruptcy forgiveness for a country, and all you have to do is do the math. I mean, 1789, 1790 was the first act of Congress. I think it was 1789 or 1790. 70 years later, when bankruptcy was about to be forgiven, they created the Civil War. So now you're bankrupt again. 70 years later, when bankruptcy was about to be forgiven, they created the stock market crash. So now you're bankrupt again. 70 years later, when the bankruptcy is about to be forgiven, they have 9/11, war on terror. Now you're bankrupt again. So if you understand that, then you start to understand how the bankruptcy trust is working. And when you go into a legal situation or any situation with these agents, even though they don't know it, but specifically in a court, when you go into a court, they're just forming a constructive trust. They just want to know who is the beneficiary, who is the trustee, and they're going to assume that you're going to take the role of trustee and authorize charges on this thing's behalf that you think is you, that you think is your name, that you're in there illegally operating. So it's this big turnaround. Everything's really upside down, and it's all done with magic. It's definitely magic, that's why you have a magistrate, right? The magi. So there's a lot more to it, but if you keep along the trust lines, you usually have a much better chance at understanding it. And trusts aren't hard. I know a lot of people have no idea what a trust is. It's just a simple agreement between two people to hold property for a third person, So if I give you, a box of fruit and I say, hey, hold this for John, we just formed a trust.
Right.
If I give you a box of fruit and I say, you give 3 to John and, 2 to Tom, now I just put terms and conditions on it. Now you have to divvy it out to 2 beneficiaries. Oh, and by the way, cut the fruit up and put it in a bowl. Now, these are terms and conditions of the trust. But I granted that property to you. I didn't, and there's other ways, there's exchanges and stuff, but granting property is usually done by a settler, someone that grants property in the trust. So, real simple. You keep it real simple that way, and you start to understand that there's only 3 parties. There's the grantor, the trustee, and the beneficiary.
Right.
And that's it. Yeah. And so, it's a triangle, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was noticing in one of your videos that you offered to pay at a court. You were assistance of counsel for someone. This is one of your earlier YouTube videos, and you were offering to pay in the courtroom with a birth certificate, and and discharge what was supposedly owed. And I've heard other people say that we can pay with these securities. How does that work exactly?
Well, you're not really paying. I mean, you are paying them. You're just giving them a shit ton more money than they're already stealing from you, really. So it's not the greatest way to go, but it can be done. Well, the certificate is the evidence of the security agreement, right? So that could be negotiable. You can negotiate that instrument. So what we would do, or what we did a few times just to, experiment with it and see where it goes, is we would negotiate that instrument just like any security certificate, just like any negotiable instrument in commerce. You take that and you negotiate it. You can pay it to the order of, you can assign it. There's a few things. And once you give that to the state, the prosecutor or the attorney general, they're now in custody of the defendant because the defendant exists on paper, number one. And number two, they've got, you've assigned all your interest over to them in that property. So according to the Trading with the Enemy Act, you're supposed to be, the case is supposed to be dismissed. So, because you've given all the enemy has given the property, you've given the property over, and you're not an enemy anymore. You've given the property over to the enemy, essentially. And they're able now to hold that property and dismiss the case under the Trading with the Enemy Act, at least here. Other countries probably different. They probably have enemy trading laws as well. But the bottom line is really that you're giving trust property over to them, and you're assigning it and handing it over, and it's all about the trust. So you're saying, hey, I'm going to assign you interest here. Now they can take that and do whatever they want with it. They can create more securities based off of that and make a shit ton of money, tons of money.
Yeah, I mean, that's what everything it is just our signature. When we are agreeing throughout our life that we are that person, then they're just making money off our signature, like with the mortgages, right? I mean, the mortgage is paid off when we sign for it.
Yeah, because you're the creditor. You're the creditor, and they're making you believe that they're the creditor, but you're the creditor. They're stealing your credit, and then they're lending it back to you for a fee.
I mean, every mortgage is. I mean, when it comes to property taxes, mortgages, I mean, the level of fraud that we don't even know that we're dealing with is insane.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's in the trillions, of course. And that's all. A lot of that stuff is privately traded from what I understand. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's traded on the stock market, but they're private trades. I don't think that they're that wide open in the public. And it's not like they take your birth certificate and, trade on that. they trade on securities that are made from your signature. So you technically, as a beneficiary, and it's drawn on your, excuse me, your securities account, your social security account. So, technically the proceeds from that are supposed to come back to you, the capital gains, but they're just, making money hand over fist. And it's all really just to suck the life energy out of you, because that's really what it's about. It's more about your soul than it is about the money.
Right. The whole system with the Federal Reserve notes and the, usury and fiat and fractional reserve, it's just to keep us down. It's just that we get these mortgages. It's not so much that they have all the money in the world and all the gold and everything, right? But it's just so we are not getting free. I mean, when you look at I've seen quotes on what communism, and we're obviously we're seeing our whole society being morphed into a communist regime, but the whole thing with communism is they just want to take your property.
Yeah. And I would argue that we've been communist since the Civil War. So, I mean, because it's, you can't, the president, the way that the country was designed, according to the 4 bylaws, the president can't just arbitrarily start shooting out executive orders. I mean, and calling it law. That's a dictator. I mean, no matter how you slice and dice it, that's a dictator. A president cannot make law. That's why there's a legislative branch. So we've always had a dictator. It's just been, they had to do it slowly because people still had in their memory that this was a free country, which it was only free for about 10 years. Maybe 4.
I was going to say 3 years.
Yeah, 13 really.
Oh, okay, was it?
In my opinion. And you have the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation, and then after that, Northwest Territory. And once the Constitution was ratified, it was just basically it was a scam, really. Nobody was free at that point.
Right. Well, it was 13th Amendment, and then the 14th Amendment. It was like 13th Amendment was for, abolishing slavery, but the 14th was to make us all slaves as citizens.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the Constitution itself was designed for that reason. It didn't have anything to do with you and me, and that's why Patrick Henry was pissed, because he was like, how are you going to create a contract that you're saying I'm a part of? I don't want to be part of that.
Yeah,
I don't have anything to do with that. That's why it's everything is supposed to be, voluntary, right? You're supposed to have an option. Well, the law is suggestive. The speed limit is suggestive. It's not, oh, this is the law and you can't go over it. No, it's, hey, slow down, because if you're going too fast, you're probably going to hurt yourself or somebody. That's really what it is. But they've turned, of course, they've turned the whole machine into, oh, well, it's the law. No, it's not the law, because I'm, as a free man, that's suggestive. I'm not hurting anybody. It's, so yeah, they flipped the whole thing around. The Constitution allowed them to do that.
Right. I look at the Declaration of Independence as really something that carries more weight than the Constitution. For me, the Constitution is about keeping the government in their box, and it's about persons. Everything's persons and stuff. But when I look at the Declaration of Independence, it talks about all men are created free. So I'm a man. I'm a living soul. I'm not a person. So I'm gonna lean on that. So I just want to give you a quick background on me. So I woke up in 2012. I had a UFO sighting. Okay. I heard that you woke up in, what was it, 2009, around there?
Yeah, around there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I went down the rabbit hole starting in 2012. I saw a black triangle sighting. It dematerialized, blah, 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 whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. That led me down the rabbit hole to many things, to where I built up a big following. I had 60,000 followers this year they deleted me because I was putting out information that I had gained about the certain thing that happened last year. I had a public records request that revealed something that would blow the whole thing off this thing.
No, of course.
And so they deleted my account. And right now I'm working on correcting my status, because I plan on filing Title 42, 1983 deprivation of rights under civil action against 1 public servant, a health officer, and 4 corporations that would not let me operate in commerce without wearing a mask, which is classified by the FDA as a medical device.
Right.
And so I'm going through the private administrative process right now with those 5. And I'm on the true bill. I just got done with the notice of default.
So explain that to me, because I can tell you that most of what's out there on that administrative process is not going to stick.
Okay, because this is good.
So but if certain things, if were done, it might. So how did you actually do that?
Okay, so I'm not sure if you've heard of Alphonse Fagiolo at IM has sent me. Okay, so this has been layers. When I first started doing this, we were just studying the laws and the codes and the mandates and everything, and realizing that they can't make us, they can't prevent us entry. You know, there's the 1964 Civil Rights Act. There's, where I am, California Civil Code 51B. There's laws that are well established that allow us to go operate in commerce without partaking in a medical device or getting discriminated against. So I lean on my religious exemption, and I don't have a medical exemption, but I lean on that because these exemptions say all you have to do is have trouble breathing. Or you could have, you get anxious or claustrophobic, so so anyways, I sent these companies, I got everything on video. I had of these interactions of, we're talking outside the store, they're not letting us in, and so I have evidence there. And then I sent them affidavits. So I sent them a notice of claim, and for hefty dollar amount, an affidavit of fact, a declaration of truth, which said, number one, this is what happened. Number two, this is the law that I'm standing on that says you can't do that to me.
And you sent that to the store, the business?
Yeah, the first round was 3 documents: a notice of claim, an affidavit of fact, and an affidavit of status, which is which is this one right here that I bring everywhere, that says, I'm not under the jurisdiction of you. I'm not a person. I'm only under the jurisdiction of the Creator.
Right, but I'm saying you served it to the organization.
I sent it registered mail to the CEO and the one who was in charge of that specific store.
Okay.
The manager.
In the future,
yeah,
I would always send it to the registered agent, because the registered agent receives service of process. They're the one that receive legal mail.
Who's the registered agent? Registered agent.
Every company has to have a registered agent. Every registered organization that's registered with the Secretary of State has to have a registered agent. So you just look them up on the Secretary of State's website, look up the company, and they'll tell you who the registered agent is, because you have to serve them for proper legal service of process.
Okay.
So that's one thing. But go ahead. I'm just going to go as you tell me, so I can go through and see if there's any things that, might be deficient.
Yeah. And so I started learning from Rick Martin at Constitutional Law Group, and he didn't have a process for the private process that was really specific. It was just send them an affidavit. If it goes unrebutted, that stands as truth in law in commerce and court. But
so that's wrong, completely wrong, because that means I could easily send you an affidavit right now, and you and I don't know each other from nothing, and I could say, hey, if you don't answer this, you owe me something. And then I could take that to court. The court's going to go, what are you talking about? This man doesn't know, you don't have any, there's no agreement there. There's no, so you have to have an agreement. In other words, you have to say, hey, here's my agreement. Like, if you do this, if you take this, and this action against me, that solidifies the following agreement. Bam, 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 bam. Now we have an agreement. Once you do one of those acts, we now have an agreement, right? Now they can't rebut that because they received it. And if the registered agent was served, they received it. And now that is a legally binding contract, because you told them, hey, we're going to interact together in some way. And if we do, then here's what we agreed to. But if I just randomly send you something and there's no obligation on their part to do anything for me or any duty, the court's not going to uphold that, because they're going to say, well, why does he have a duty to you? Or why does this company have a duty to you? You know what I mean? So that's one of the, because I've seen this a million times over the years. I've done administrative process myself wrong. All those years I've done it wrong, and then I realized, oh, well, that makes sense. You can't really just walk up to somebody and say, hey, you owe me something,
Right.
And because you didn't respond, that means we have an agreement. Well, no, not really. I don't have to respond to you for nothing, because it's a free country, right?
Right.
So, but once I say, hey, if you do this to me, now we have an agreement, because I gave you some obligation that you have to follow that includes me. It's now you and me in this together. Like, there's a meeting of the minds right there.
Right. Well, right now where I have them in they're defaulted. We already have an agreement. Because I
Mhm.
basically, the way I structured these affidavits, I would love for you to look at them. We did them really well. We basically just said, if you don't get back to us with your evidence that what we're saying is not true, based on the facts, evidence, and the law, then we have a binding agreement. So we put it in a way that we use negative averment. You know, show me that I don't have a right to operate in commerce, or that the First Amendment of the Constitution doesn't grant me religious freedom to enter any store. The Civil Rights Act doesn't give me the ability to enter your store. So we use negative averment, and we said it now. If you don't get back to us within 10 days, you're going to be agreeing that what we're saying is truth, law, and facts. And it's going to uphold in any court in the United States of America. And we use really good language, strong language. Pardon me real quick, the trash guy's here. But so I think the affidavits are pretty solid. I think they are pretty solid. We've given them three, everything is threes, right? You give them three chances,
Right.
And so I at the notice of default, I said, we have officially now a contract. So now I sent off the true bill. That's where we're at with. And so now we're going to do 2 more true bills and then 3 more notices to debtor. And then I want to file a 42-1983. And so I'm taking the jurisdictionary course.
Just remember, if you're going to file a 1983, you've got to be a U.S. citizen, because 1983 only applies to U.S. citizens. It does not apply to non-citizen nationals. So you're going to put yourself in that jurisdiction. Okay, a lot of people do it. And trust me, I'm not trying to rain on your parade at all. I'm just telling you these courts and the way that they actually work. When you get in there, they're going to look at all this stuff. And I've seen a lot of these cases. I go right on my case text site and I search them and I find them and I see why they're thrown out, and a lot of these are thrown out because while that all seems like great, solid law, it's actually not. It's not recognizable. They're like, no, that it doesn't work that way. Right? Because the biggest thing I've always seen with administrative process stuff is once it gets to court, it tanks all the time because it's not structured properly. And you really have to understand how these courts work. And everybody goes, oh, the courts are corrupt. The courts are corrupt. Well, no, they're not, because we've done things that were procedurally absolutely correct. And the court has come to our aid because we went in equity. We didn't go in common law. We didn't go in at law. We didn't go in, yes, statutorily speaking as well, because we went in equity, but everything was done in equity to the letter. And that's why equity is super important, because you get relief from equity, you get remedy from common law. Remedy comes from the contract. If the contract is not absolutely, 100% to the T the way it needs to be in their court system, they're going to kick it out. They're going to go, even if you're correct in the theory, they're going to kick it out. Does that make sense? Yep.
I don't know if anyone can hear me. What's going on? Okay, here we go.
There we go. Little
Cool.
bump in the road.
All right. It's just getting good too, because, all right. So
yeah, we're talking about straddling the fence. That's where, I start cautioning people, because if you're saying you're a living man and you're this and that and the other, and then you're going in under these common law, statutory principles, even though you're not intending to, that's kind of like, wearing two hats and straddling the fence. So when you go private, it's one way or the other. Like, you look for the equity, the exclusive equity, and you go in on the equity principles.
Okay.
Or you go statutory, and again, you're going to have to jump through all those hoops and make sure everything's to the letter, or they'll kick it out. So,
I don't want to deal with the courts, because everyone that I'm learning from is saying you don't want to be in court. Like, I honestly wouldn't want to go in court unless I have taken the jurisdictionary course. I know exactly what I'm doing, or I have the level of knowledge that you have of the law. And
and even that, though, I mean, here's the thing, man. These guys, these prosecutors and stuff, they're excellent at process and procedure. So when you go into court, even if you're studying jurisdictionary and stuff, you know, they'll hang something on a technicality, you know, just because that's how they can get you. See, and that's why I got so sick of all that. I'm like, what's the root here? Oh, you guys are administrating the trust. And there's a lot of these guys online that are like, oh, you don't need trust and you don't need equity. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but not true, man. That's your most powerful position, because that's how they are sucking the lifeblood out of you. And that's the only way that they can survive. Once you pull that away from them, you've just choked you've choked the serpent, you know, and you're cutting the head off, and they're like, oh shit, because they're liable under trust law, right? But when you go in under corporate stuff and you're trying to, you know, common law is at law. That's common law went into at law, and common law is where they, you know, go on precedent and, you know, all these court cases from the past, you know, that's all common law. You know, equity can be done right then and there, and has to be done according to the natural law, you know.
And equity is just what's fair, what's right, you know.
Right, exactly.
Well, under the law.
Yeah. So if you search U.S. legal equity law, they've got a great, like, 7 bullet points of what equity is. And it's great, man. It tells you God's law. It's like, oh, okay. And when you read about equity, the bishops started the equity thing, right? The bishops of the cat, because this is all about the Catholic Church. Yeah. I mean, that's really, I've got some friends that are really, really good with that. And I mean, they're writing deed polls and doing things that are completely 100% spiritual, and these guys are folding like cheap tables. I mean, you know, it's all that other stuff. The arguing and fighting is their realm. So I'm not saying it can't be done, but you have to be very, very skilled at it. For me, I would rather go in there and say, well, I'm the king, so who's taking my property? Who's touching my property? Just like in my Kansas case. You know, I did that on purpose because, yes, I have a driver's license. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't have a driver's license. The estate has a driver's license. The estate has a registered vehicle. The estate has everything, right? So I'm just going on down the road in my free right of mobility. I don't even use the term travel. I'm just, you know, I have a right to travel. Well, I've never seen a court case that says, you know, I have a inalienable right to travel. I've seen cases that say the Constitution protects free mobility, but I never saw, like, the right to travel. So I don't use any of that, because I'm like, it doesn't matter. I have the beneficial right interest in the trust that holds this thing. So when a police officer is pulling me over, I'm not thinking about right to travel. I'm thinking about, are you trying to charge the trust, right? Because you're a municipal organization, and the only way you can charge that trust is if we have a contract and I've defaulted on the contract. So I'm not here talking to you on the side of the road about travel. I'm trying to find out if you're trying to rob the account as a pirate, because that's what they're doing, right? So I, you know, of course, you know, am I under arrest? Am I free to go? Yes, or am I under arrest? No. Am I free to go? No. Well, then you're trying to steal the wealth of the person, and you want to see papers, right? Which I also have a right to be secure in, the person and the papers. And I can't give that to you. I'm sorry, but I can't. Now, without counsel. You know?
What's your name? You know, they're just trying to establish a contract with you, right? And if they do write you a ticket, you can write no contract, all rights reserved, without prejudice, and send it back within 72 hours.
Yeah. So exactly. So I knew I could do that, but I didn't want to go that route, because I wanted to set some landmines. I wanted to go, okay, we're going to experiment with this from the trust perspective completely, right? So that's why I handled it the way I did. And I think a lot of people, when they saw that, you know, the paperwork people that just want to do paperwork and think it's all going to work out, they're like, his stuff doesn't work. Look what happened, which is so funny, because I don't carry documents with me. I don't have to. All my documents are recorded in the county. I just go right online and pull them up and go, it's right here. You know, I don't need to carry them. I just serve them with it after that, right? So what I'm getting at is getting into the trust and having them admit to me that they need that information so they can charge me is huge. And now I'm building against them. I'm building equity against them, actually, is what I'm doing. So when this officer is asking me this stuff, I'm thinking, okay, what do you really need? So I got his superior on the phone, and I said, look, man, I just can't give you any information without counsel. You know, I said, I know I have a right to do that. So we're going back and forth. He goes, well, at a bare minimum, we need your name, address.
Yeah.
And it was name, address, and birth date. Why? Because that all ties back to the original matrix document with the name, the address, and the birth date.
Yeah.
The only difference there is the address. What do you know where your trust is? Do you know where the address of your trust is? Because I'll tell you where it is. It's at the vital statistics. We've already confirmed that. Do you know where your trust account is held? I'll tell you where it's held, at the Federal Reserve. That correlates to the letter on the back of your Social Security card. I've already confirmed that. Are you the heir of the estate? No, you're not. They will not allow you to be. You're only the beneficiary of the trust. So, because we've had them confirm that. So, you know, for me, I don't get into the whole game of all this other stuff because you guys are operating a trust without authority. You don't have the authority. And if you do have authority to operate it, you better show me where the authority is, because y'all are creating securities and stealing my wealth without my knowledge. You know,
this is hard for me to process all this stuff.
Hard for most people.
Like my brain is firing, and I'm really trying to understand the estate and the trust, but I'm also trying to balance the knowledge that I'm learning about correcting status. You want to correct your status so you have standing on the land to make a claim.
So let's talk about that. No one that I know, that I've seen on the internet or I know personally, has correct status. No one, not even me. Okay. Because correct status means diplomatic immunity and full access to your wealth. You're done. That's correct status. What we are doing is declaring constantly our correct status, right? But we didn't change anything in the system, because there is proper protocol that they don't teach us. It's there, right? It's up to us to figure it out where that occurs. And the only people I've ever heard of doing that, they disappear because they have to sign some NDA and all, which we're clearly not going to do when we get there. But we're getting there. We're very close to having this whole thing cinched up. But, you know, that's, to me, no one has corrected status. What we do have is knowledge of our correct status, which is good, because when we assert that in an affidavit or we assert that on a piece of paper, it lets them know that, oh shit, whether it's in our records or not, we can't prove against them, right? Because they don't have any proof that that's not our status. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
So that's where correcting the status from what we're doing, you and I, we're saying, I've declared my intention and corrected my status on this record. Your records are wrong, and now we've created a barrier that they can't get through because we've separated ourselves from the organization that they have as our status. You see what I'm saying? But we still have to figure out the legal process way that the system recognizes, oh, give them their diplomatic passport, they're done. And that's a white passport, right? It's a diplomatic passport. And then you're done. There's no laws that apply to you unless you hurt somebody intentionally, like, period. That's it. And then the access to the wealth, well, that's a whole other ballgame, you know?
Yeah. Well,
we're getting there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we would have time if I were to ask you, what do you mean when you say we're close? We're close to figuring this out, because I think there would be too much it would take too much time to explain your strategy for that.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I won't explain that in the public,
right?
Because that's why a lot of people, or where a lot of people go wrong, is they try to put this stuff out in the public, but it's meant to be private. Right. Because the public realm is where the enemy is, and that's where, well, and they consider us enemies. So the private realm is where you have all your rights. You don't have any rights in the public. You just have the privileges of, you know, whatever that municipality decides it's going to try to give you. That's where we're saying, no, this is private. And because, so let's clear this up too. That'll really help people. You either have a government office or a municipal corporation. Now, everyone says the United States is a corporation. That is 100% not true. Okay. That is misinformation that's been put out for 20 years, 30 years, that people are following. That is not true.
They're a trust.
Yeah. They're a trust. And I can disprove that very easily in the law. It's very simple. Go to the statutes at large and look for the act that made the federal government a corporation. And the only act you're going to see people put up there is the Act of 1871. And make the government a federal corporation. It made Washington, D.C. a municipality, which is like every state, well, not every state and county. A lot of counties aren't incorporated, which is great, because if you live in an unincorporated county, you should take advantage of that, you know, because it's not a municipal corporation, so it doesn't have all those statutes and codes don't apply there, or they shouldn't. Right?
But you know, when you think of like where I live, City of Roanoke Park, that's a corporate. I mean, they're filed on Dun and Bradstreet. They're making money. It's all commerce. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's always my question, right? So in my affidavit, when I put that into my case for Kansas, I said, well, I've got your Dun and Bradstreet here, so you are a municipal corporation. Oh, and you're also a government constitutionally created organization. So which capacity are you acting in?
Yeah.
That's all I need to know. You just need to clarify, because if you're in your municipal capacity, we need a contract. If you're in your government capacity, we need an oath of office. And they don't have either.
They don't have oaths. Yeah, we've asked oaths. They say they don't have them.
Right.
So
yeah, then ask them then say, okay, well, here's your Dun and Bradstreet number. So are you acting in this capacity?
Right.
They're probably going to say no. Well, if you're not acting in this capacity and you don't have an oath, then somebody here is committing treason.
Right.
Which is it going to be? Oh, yeah, we are acting as a corporation. Okay, then where's the contract? Because the corporation can't do anything to the public without a contract.
Right. Oh my. Okay. So.
See what I mean?
There's so much to wrap your head around, because like if I want to file these 42 1983s, but I'm also working on getting into the private and on the land and correcting my status, so only a citizen can file a 42 1983. So.
Yeah, I'll send you some info on that, because look, I was learning from a guy by the name of Paul Andrew Mitchell at supremelaw.org. Okay. Paul Andrew Mitchell is a former engineer. His mind is incredible. He's retired now. I think he's in his 70s, and he won't, you know, he doesn't do consultations and stuff anymore, but he took everything all the way up to the Supreme Court. When they have researched literally just about every act of Congress. Now, he had a research team. Okay. Now there's thousands of acts of Congress. These guys pick apart not just the statutes at large, not just the U.S. code, but they go deep, deep, deep into every single bit of case law. If you give them a subject, they will go deep on every bit of case law and everything they can find on that subject and tell you exactly what it is. And that's the guy I learned from, that the United States wasn't a corporation. And when I looked at his research, I was like, he's totally right. There is no way you can disprove this. He's absolutely right. And he's excellent with process and procedure. I mean, he's private attorney general for a reason. Most people think a private attorney general can like represent the people. No, it represents the government, actually. The private attorney general represents the government. It's a citizen that represents the government and says, hey, government, you need to look at this because this is going to affect your interest or the public negatively. So you need to look at this. So I'm going to prosecute this for you because it's negatively impacting the public. That's what a private attorney general does. It's not like an attorney that goes in for people in court and stuff like that. But anyway, that's what he did, and he's amazing. The guy's just phenomenal. His website's still up. Supremelaw.org is his website.
Okay. Well, I mean, how are you handling all this lawlessness? Because my ability to contract, that's in Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, that you can't impair the obligation of the contract, right? So yeah. I am exempt from wearing masks. I'm exempt from these medical procedures. Now, I can't operate in commerce to feed my family like I used to with all these mandates and codes and stuff, which are not law, and they don't carry the weight of law, but we have everyone under this spell of deception, so everyone's going along with it, and so I can't go into a place and shop anymore, so I need to get relief somehow. And so I was aware that the private administrative process, if you perfect your claim, and then you correct your status, now you have standing.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, that may be true. Very rarely is it done. Very rarely is it done.
It starts up here. It starts up here. It's how you live your life. It's not just the paperwork. It's getting the knowledge. It's knowing who you are and knowing what you're not. And so I've gone down that road for this past year of correcting that. But I need to know that there's a way to get relief. I feel like the Creator always gives us a solution to every problem we face, and I am focused on finding that solution.
Look to the equity. Look to the equity, because that's where you're going to find most of your solutions. You know, now there are some guys that are really good. Now, so I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy by the name of Rod Class.
What